This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed heads to the battlefront against the Tigray rebels. Somalia's Prime Minister declares a state of emergency in the wake of the country's worsening drought. And the newly launched Egypt Museum website offers virtual tours in a bid to promote tourism. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. With me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Blitz. Tunisia looks to its neighbour Libya for more economic opportunities. And South Africa's president calls for more efforts to deal with youth unemployment in Africa. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's start today's bulletin with the latest from Ethiopia. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been leading the Ethiopian civil war from the front lines. This has been confirmed by the government spokesperson, who says Deputy Prime Minister Demeke Mekonnen Hassen is in charge of routine government business for now. The military is fighting against Tigrayan rebels who say they're advancing towards the capital Addis Ababa. The rebels earlier this week claimed they had captured the town of Shewerobit to the northeast of the capital. The United Kingdom is the latest country to ask its citizens to leave Ethiopia immediately. Meanwhile, the African Union is leading efforts to put an end to fighting, with little progress reported so far.
His Excellency, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, as per his promise and starting from yesterday morning, is giving directions through the national forces. Several political parties' leaders, including leaders of the ruling Prosperity Party, have marched onto the battlefront. Others too, from different walks of life, are doing the same in their large numbers. On the other hand, the rest of the leadership are busy engaged in other government activities, such as social, economic and diplomatic works. Based on that, His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister, who is also our Foreign Minister, Demeke Mekonnen, will coordinate those efforts.
Well, let's go live now to Addis Ababa, where CGTN's Girum Chala joins us with the very latest from Ethiopia. Girum, of course, the UK telling its citizens that they should leave Ethiopia as the conflict escalates. What is the latest on the security situation there?
Lindy, in most part of the country, the situation remains to be calm. Normal activities in the capital, Addis Ababa, remain to be going on. People going to their own businesses, schools and others, everything open, no curfews introduced across the country at the moment under a state of emergency, of course. But in the north, war continues to be intensifying. As you have said, the Prime Minister has joined the war that has changed the whole chapter in this conflict of more than 1 year time between the Ethiopian National Defense Force, the Amhara Regional Force and others against the TPLF rebel group itself. So in the north, we have been reporting all day today throughout this week at the same time the intensification of the war itself. But today we have been hearing that about 270, 300 kilometers away from the capital Addis Ababa, war remains to be intensifying, and also the Ethiopian National Defense Force is saying that it is gaining ground. It is winning, perhaps winning back some of the most strategic locations in different parts in the Amhara regional state and also in the Afar regional state. So war has continued in the north, but the rest of the country remains to be very calm, Lindy.
Well, thank you so much for that update. Girum Chala there live for us from Addis Ababa. Now, Ethiopian Olympic heroes Haile Gebrselassie and Feyisa Lelesa have declared that they are prepared to go to the front line in the country's war. This comes as tens of thousands of residents in the capital, Addis Ababa, signed up to join defense groups. The volunteers are searching pedestrians and vehicles for weapons and suspected rebels. Tigrayan forces recaptured the regional capital, Mekelle, earlier this year and began pushing into neighboring regions, prompting Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to declare a 6-month state of emergency. Right now, let's take a look at a timeline of recent key events in the Ethiopian conflict. In June, TPLF rebels take control of the Tigrayan regional capital of Mekele. In the following month, Tigray's forces push into the neighboring regions of Amhara and Afar, threatening to march towards the capital Addis Ababa. In the meantime, Ethiopia's relationship with the UN deteriorates as 7 senior UN officials are expelled from the country. The UN accuses government of blocking aid delivery in Tigray, which Addis Ababa denies. Government proceeds to launch airstrikes in Tigray against the rebel forces. At the start of November, TPLF announces that it has formed an alliance with 8 other anti-government groups. And as the conflict escalates, government calls for Ethiopians to take up arms and defend the capital from a rebel surge. Well, let's now bring in Samuel Getechu, an independent journalist based in Ethiopia, for some analysis on the implications of the conflict in the country.
A very mainstream assumption that the U.S. is really looking for perhaps a government change in Ethiopia. Ethiopians often look at the experiences they had in terms of getting involved in local issues, like in countries like Yemen, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, too many to count. And this is where we are. But again, the US, the Biden administration has really been a wedge issue among Ethiopians. There are those that really want the US to get involved. There are many Ethiopians that are saying the US shouldn't get involved. But again, this conflict is a wedge issue among Ethiopians. People that say that peaceful engagement should be the way to move forward. This is part of the African Union's vision of having African solution to African problems. They've been saying for a long time. The African Union envoy, the former president of Nigeria, Mr. Obasanjo, has been saying there is a window of opportunity to really solve this and end this conflict. Because this conflict has really impacted millions of people. More than 2 million people have been displaced. And it's a conflict that's painfully really defined by sexual exploitation of women. And the allegations are not just one-sided, but they accuse, even the UN report that came out a few weeks ago with the partnership of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission says all actors, all parties were involved. It's not just impacting everyday Ethiopians. It's also creating the image that Ethiopia is not stable enough for foreign investment to come to this country. The French, the Turkish citizens are even living today, as of today.
Well, CGTN correspondent Girum Chala is still with us live in Addis Ababa. Let's return to him now for more on the latest developments in the Ethiopia conflict. Girum, it's not very often that we see a head of state decide to take an active role in an ongoing conflict. Tell us, what's been the reaction to the Prime Minister's decision to join the war on the front line?
Lindy, as you've said, many people have called it unprecedented. Those diplomats based here in Addis Ababa and also even ordinary Ethiopians are appreciating the fact that the Prime Minister has taken the role of going to the war front and trying to perhaps defend the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as he also put it. The reaction has been overwhelming. Our observation, and also from the experts that we've been hearing, people in their thousands are now marching into the battlefields in the Amhara regional state and also Afar regional state, following the Prime Minister's footsteps. Remember, this war took more than a year. It's a war that's happening within the country. It's not a foreign enemy that people are trying to fight. But then again, the Prime Minister and others are putting it that TPLF has posed an issue that the country must avoid as soon as possible before its freedom, territorial integrity, and others are compromised. From the TPLF side, they are still determined, by the way, to continue the war until what they say, a chokehold by the government of humanitarian access and others are freed so that they can sit for negotiations. But in general terms, the reaction for the Prime Minister's move of going to the war front, leading the Ethiopian National Defense Force from there, has been widely accepted and is motivating many people to follow suit.
Well, in the meantime, we are, of course, continuing to hear calls for peace from both regional and international leaders. Do we know of the ongoing efforts at this point to de-escalate the tension in the country?
Lindy, all parties who are trying to broker peace between the central government, the federal government, and TPLF, the African Union, the United Nations, the U.S. government, and others are asking for one thing: unconditional cessation of hostilities, and also for the parties to come for a round table discussion so that this ongoing war, which is claiming lives and evicting so many people from their homes in Amhara regional state alone, more than 2 million people have been evicted and counting. This cessation of hostility, unconditional cessation of hostility, was expected. Olusegun Obasanjo is taking the front line role of bringing these parties together. He's been in Mekelle several times and speaking to Ethiopian authorities, including the Prime Minister. But then again, the preconditions, perhaps from both sides, is what is posing a threat of not bringing them together. Ethiopian authorities, in particular, are saying that there is no equaling a rebel group which is trying to destroy a sovereign nation with a democratically elected government which is trying to run a nation democratically and also by bringing people together. So whatever demands TPLF is putting is unacceptable. They should put down arms, leave the territories they have controlled, particularly in the Amhara and Afar regional state. By then, we can sit down for discussion. So many experts are saying, Lindy, that that is a sign of failure, that the Prime Minister has now taken the decision to go to the war front and finish the job as soon as possible. We'll report to you what the results of his moves are, but for now, this is what we know.
Thank you so much for that update. Girum Chala live for us there in Addis Ababa. Now, turning now to Sudan's political process. After the deal between Sudan's ruling military administration and the reinstated Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, the PM was reinstated on Sunday after signing a 14-point agreement with military chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Sudanese people are wondering what changes this will bring to their country. Nabu Muhyiddin reports from Khartoum.
After the reinstatement of Abdallah Hamdok as Prime Minister, there are mixed reactions among Sudanese people about the deal with the military.
This deal is rejected. Hamdok should have discussed this step with his political allies, the Freedom and Change Coalition, not with the ones who toppled him. We reject this deal, and it's a correction for the military takeover, not a correction for the revolution.
If the partnership with the military will be successful, it wouldn't take this long time, tears and blood. It's really confusing whether Hamdok will be supported by his old political allies or a Burhan political incubator.
It's a good deal, although it's not satisfying everyone. The political parties now should work for the next elections and stop fighting over chairs.
Abdallah Hamdok has promised to form other governance structures, including the Legislative Council, prosecution, and independent judiciary system. The new deal proposes amendments to the country's constitutional declaration, which serves as the transition constitution. Political analysts like Ashraf Abdulaziz think it's a long road for the Prime Minister to restore confidence.
If Hamdok cancelled all the decisions taken by Burhan after the power grab and restored the civil service positions for the protest groups, and he exempted the former government loyalists from service, he could build confidence and reassurances to the protest groups and form a consensus.
The United States is now placing the political deal, but it says its support for Sudan's transition relies on military and civilian leaders sticking to commitments made in their agreement. Naba Muhyiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Libya's Elections Committee has closed applications for the presidential race. Dozens have applied as the country hopes to march towards stability after a decade of civil war. The Elections Committee is now reviewing the applications and says it will announce the final list of candidates by December 6th. Here's more with CGTN's Adel Al-Makhrouki.
98 Libyans applied to the nation's first ever presidential election, among them 2 women. Almost all prominent political figures who emerged after the 2011 uprising have submitted their candidacy documents before the Elections Committee closed its doors on Monday.
I believe it's a very healthy sign to see so many people running through the elections. Libya never had political battles before. We are now creating a new culture. There is a feeling among people now that the seat of power is not too far away. That's much better than going to arms and returning to war.
Many Libyan factions are interested to fill the seat former President Muammar Gaddafi left, including his son Saif al-Islam. The country's elections committee is now accepting appeals against all applicants. It will then announce a final list of approved candidates by December 6.
There is still deep division among Libyan society, especially over power and leading Libya. Is the international community capable of forcing Libyan factions to accept the results? Will Libya's West accept a presidential victory for Saif al-Islam Gaddafi? Will they accept a Khalifa Haftar victory? So before announcing the results, there must be guarantees and mechanisms set to ensure that all of Libya accepts the results of the vote.
More than 1,700 Libyans have applied for the legislative race. The number is expected to increase as the elections committee will keep receiving applicants until the first week of December. 2.8 million Libyans are eligible to vote in the December 24 elections. Unless something sparks violence, it appears that Libya's elections are on track. Appeals against some candidates are pouring in. Some politicians have even appealed against the constitutionality of the election laws, what could see the legal foundation for the whole vote collapse. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The Somali Prime Minister declares a state of emergency in the wake of the country's worsening drought. And Nigerian authorities warn of fake COVID-19 vaccination certificates in the market.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown. As they do so,
there are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
Is the front line now after 9 days of fighting?
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
the front line. Within clear view of this front line position.
Somali Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble has declared a state of emergency over the deadly droughts plaguing the Horn of Africa nation. Roble made the announcement after chairing an extraordinary cabinet meeting on Tuesday. The Somali Prime Minister has called on citizens as well as the international community to assist those affected. The United Nations puts at 3.5 million the number of Somalis facing acute food insecurity. Climate projections by the UN indicate that the country is facing a 4th consecutive failed rainfall season.
We need urgent support from everyone. I call upon all Somalis, business people, the international community and friends of Somalia to make concrete efforts to significantly contribute to mitigate the suffering of those affected by the drought.
The causes of Somalia's repeated cycle of drought include the inter-clan conflicts, insufficient water, and the effects of climate changes. So, if the government comes up with a long-term plan, we can solve the problem forced by drought in the country. we can work out something that will save us from opting for national emergencies. We can have 10 years, 20 years plan, and the government has to lead the initiative.
Well, let's take a closer look at the food security issue in Somalia, and for that we're joined by Etienne Peterschmidt, the FAO representative in the country. Thank you so much for joining us, Etienne. This is the first time that the Somali government has declared a state of emergency over drought in the country. Talk us through how we got here.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. You mentioned earlier on the figure of 3.5 million of people food insecure. But just to put things in perspective, the people that are directly affected by the drought as of today is estimated at around 2.6 million. If we look at this globally over on the map, this is 66 districts out of 74 districts across the country. We also have a number of people that have been displaced due to the drought, and we estimate that number to be about 113. As you also rightly mentioned, we have faced a series of failed rainy season over the past years in 2020, in 2021, and the climate prospect for the coming months until next year look as if we are going to continue facing a lack of rain, and that obviously will impact farmers in terms of how much they will be able to produce and harvest, and even more so livestock owners. We have seen numerous livestock dead. I've been to the field myself in the south, in Jubaland state, which is one of the drought-affected states, and I've witnessed emaciated animals, livestock markets pretty much empty. People have no livestock to sell. Either the livestock have died or they're just simply in such a poor condition that their value in the market would be near to zero. So pretty grim picture, really. I've seen burkhards, those water collection reservoir that have been built by the communities, all have dried out. So as I said, the situation looks pretty grim, very similar to what we had observed in 2016 and 2017, which was one of the major droughts.
And as you say, a very grim picture indeed, but one that is not entirely new to Somalia. It's clear, however, that the country lacks the resources to adequately respond to this perennial problem of drought. But what about the international community? Is there a sense that they've failed Somalia to some extent?
I think we learned a lot during the 2017 drought, and one of the big lessons we've learned was that anticipatory action, early response is very much key to avoid or to mitigate the impact of the drought. So I wouldn't say that the international community hasn't done enough, but yes, there is certainly more we could be doing with additional funds. I mean, if we're looking at the humanitarian response plan issued by the United Nations, the current funding is fairly low, and certainly FAO and other UN agencies could be doing more with additional funds.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for that, Etienne Peterschmidt, the FAO representative for Somalia. Now, meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Bentiu, the capital of South Sudan's unity state, is worsening due to persistent flooding. As CGTN's Joy Kirukijuma reports, homes have been destroyed and crops and harvests ruined.
Flooded farms and houses submerged in water. This is the situation in Bentiu, South Sudan. Displaced civilians are now seeking higher ground to make shelter.
We are facing devastating floods. Everybody is worried about it. We don't know how it will improve because we are not even safe. We could be in a dry place today and tomorrow we will be submerged in water. As women, it is very difficult for us. We have no access to firewood or charcoal. We have no access to anything. We are depending on humanitarian aid.
The flooding began 2 months ago. Last month, according to UN Refugee Agency, over 700,000 people were affected by the flooding.
Basically, water is coming from everywhere, and the source of water may not be the same. And then it's not coming from the rain, because last 1 month or so we have not had any major rain. So it's actually coming from the river. So it's very difficult to predict. Sometimes that you see the water is flowing fast, sometimes you just see the water stagnant.
Humanitarian agencies and state authorities have mounted a joint emergency response in Bentiu. The response is targeting 100,000 displaced people as health and hygiene concerns grow.
The main purpose of working in this particular portion is to ensure that the access to the dumping site where we dump solid waste and where we put sewage is opened up, so that we can get the sewage and solid waste both from the UNMISS camp, humanitarians, and then also from the IDP.
South Sudan is not just grappling with floods, but with internal conflict, climate change, and COVID-19. This happening nearly a decade after the country gained independence from Sudan. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Nigerian authorities have warned of the existence of a black market for COVID-19 vaccination certificates in the country. Fraudsters and some dishonest public officials are selling the documents to those desperately seeking them for travel and other reasons. This was revealed by a senior government official who also announced that the Health Ministry has started a mass vaccination exercise in the country. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
Some unscrupulous citizens are procuring vaccination cards through the black market, all in an attempt to beat the system.
A disturbing trend for Africa's most populous nation. Citizens illegally purchasing COVID-19 vaccine certificates without taking the jabs. But authorities say they're determined to end this illegal practice.
I want to assure everyone that the vaccination records and certificates will be verified. And this should serve as a warning to those criminally minded persons to desist, because they will be prosecuted accordingly.
Many people say difficulties in getting vaccines and vaccine hesitancy are some of the factors that are fueling the cheating. They worry that such actions would work against the current efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19.
People are actually scared of taking the vaccine, maybe from stories they've heard about how people fall sick or how people die. But I think for people going to do the certificate, for me, I think it's illegal. I think that is just being dishonest.
Those people who pay to get the card, they're endangering their own life and other people's life. So I feel that everybody should go through the due process of getting the vaccine.
Vaccine mandate policies have become a global phenomenon since the world economy was reopened following long closures occasioned by the pandemic. Travel protocols and some employers now need proof that one has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So fraudsters are now cashing in on the demand for quick vaccination certificates, but are further jeopardizing the government's efforts to curb the spread of the virus by doing so.
The government have done well by providing the vaccine. We should take it a step further by doing, orientation. When you are not informed, you are deformed. It appears most people, though they are educated, but they are not informed. Talk about it that there is no consequence about this. Even seeing that some of us have taken the vaccine, nothing has happened to us for more than 6 months now.
The government says that just 2.9% of Nigeria's eligible population has been fully vaccinated. That's about 3.3 million people. Authorities have scaled up efforts to inoculate 50% Nigerian citizens by January 2020 so as to achieve herd immunity in the country. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Tunisia looks to its neighbor, Libya, for more economic opportunities. And South Africa's president calls for more efforts to deal with youth unemployment in Africa.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, officials in Tunisia and Libya are eyeing a fresh partnership to boost bilateral trade and economic ties between the two nations. Now, Tunisia is seeking to benefit from the gradual recovery of the neighboring country's economy after years of war. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
The Tunisian Minister of Industry, Mines and Energy said her department will put in place a new industrial strategy which will prioritize the development of the Tunisian-Libyan cooperation.
Many factories in Libya used to operate as a part of the public sector. Libyan authorities aim to reopen these industrial complexes to the private sector. This is one of the most important and immediate opportunities for Tunisian and Libyan economic operators and industrialists.
Libyan Minister of Industry and Minerals announced that his country is targeting first a real economic complementarity with Tunisia. Ahmed Abu Hisa added that the objective of the partnership is to enable the two countries capture markets in Africa, East Asia and South America.
Libya and Tunisia have all the human, financial and natural resources to achieve this economic complementarity. I call on Tunisian authorities to revise some laws to respect the principle of equal treatment in the entry of people, goods, services and money in the two states. This principle is the pillar of economic complementarity.
The Tunisian Minister of Trade and Export Development noted that Tunisia will further facilitate the flow of goods at border crossings with Libya. The Tunisian government will act quickly to identify solutions to the problem of the entry of goods in the two North African countries.
The Tunisian and Libyan governments will work to simplify the measures and improve the business climate and the legal framework governing bilateral relations. Priority sectors with high added value are the food industry, useful substances, building materials, pharmaceutical industries and hygiene products, among other sectors.
Several Tunisian, Libyan and international banking and financial institutions took part in the event.
This is an exciting and important event because it brings together the private sector of Libya and Tunisia. For IFC, we believe prosperity for Libya will come from private sector investment, peace through prosperity, and we can play a big part in that as IFC. We're looking for opportunities to invest in Libya with the private sector. We believe the private sector is an engine of growth in Libya.
152 Libyan industrial companies took part in the Made in Libya fair to strengthen the Tunisian-Libyan partnership.
The first edition of the Made in Libya exhibition is organized on the sidelines of the Tunisian-Libyan Industrial Forum. Tunisian authorities have presented several projects under the public-private partnership, including the project of the commercial and logistics zone in Bengerdan, border region with Libya. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Meanwhile, the 21st summit of the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa has concluded in Egypt's new administrative capital. The summit aimed to encourage the use of digital economy tools to facilitate business practices and also enhance member states' resilience against the economic repercussions of the coronavirus pandemic. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim. He was at the event and filed this report.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi assumed the chairmanship of the 21st COMESA meeting from the outgoing Madagascan President André Rajoelina. This year's summit, the first since 2018, has been overshadowed by the pandemic-induced economy and the slow recovery in the continent from its negative effects.
Conséquences économiques et sociales désastreuses.
Coronavirus pandemic has had a catastrophic effect on the country. More than 250,000 people lost their jobs, and many economic sectors were shocked by the COVID-19. The impact on commodity prices, food and basic goods led to social crises in the African countries.
Le choc de la COVID-19.
As the incoming chair, El-Sisi outlined his four-pillar integration strategy for the next 3 years. It is based on promoting trade integration with the other African economic blocs, industrial integration between COMESA members to create the Made in COMESA brands, health integration to tackle crises such as the pandemic, and infrastructure integration.
Egypt is formulating a mechanism to help monitor the measures taken by each country to apply the tariff cuts and incentives, as well as to adopt the scheme to achieve the goals of this strategy. The responsibility of this summit is to agree on how to speed up the recovery and strengthen our ability to face challenges such as the pandemic.
Intra-COMESA trade in pre-pandemic year 2019 was nearly $11 billion and dropped to just over $8 billion in 2020. Officials say there's potential for much more from the 21 COMESA member states, especially with the surge in digital trade and e-commerce after the coronavirus outbreak.
We therefore need to take advantage of the community opportunities that exist in enhancing COMESA's productive capacities through the uptake of digital solutions, development and investment in the fiscal infrastructure, and complementing these with trade facilitation measures for intra-regional trade to strengthen existing and new value chains and industrial growth while staying alive to the increasing role of digitizing of trade, industrialization and security.
This is the second presidency for Egypt. The first was exactly 20 years ago. There has been setbacks and progress during that period, but officials here are optimistic that going forward there will be more progress to achieve the dream of total African economic integration. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And moving on now, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has committed to balance trade between South Africa and Kenya. Now, Ramaphosa revealed this during a business forum that hosted business people from both nations. Currently, South Africa exports billions of US dollars worth of goods to Kenya. This is against imports worth only millions of US dollars from Kenya. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela with the details.
Kenya is East Africa's largest economy and South Africa's largest trading partner on the African continent outside of the SADC region. On the side of the state visit, the two leaders also addressed the South African-Kenya Business Forum to further explore new areas of economic, trade and investment cooperation. The two nations have long-standing relations. This business forum presented an opportunity to discuss trade and investment opportunities between South Africa and Kenya, to also explore the vast economic potential of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The two leaders also agreed to ensure that there is balance in trade. Currently, trade between the two nations is skewed towards South Africa.
It is embarrassingly unbalanced at the moment. It makes me uncomfortable that the trade between South Africa and Kenya is largely in South Africa's favor. We therefore need to take steps to balance it, and I'm really delighted that we are talking to a lot of Kenyan business people here, as well as South African business people.
Further, noting that trade between our two countries is currently hugely in favor of South Africa, we also agreed to task technical teams to propose measures to address this trade imbalance. And in this context, it is my hope that the technical teams will review a range of goods and services that South Africa imports from the rest of the world and identify those that South Africa could possibly source from Kenya.
There are more than 60 South African companies operating in Kenya with investments in the financial services, real estate, food and beverages, entertainment services and hospitality sector, among others. The presidents also acknowledged the need to work together to realize the potential to diversify and industrialize the continent, especially for the benefit of future generations.
And it is important that as business people, we begin to envision this future that is coming towards us. In order to grasp and to embrace this future, we must become leading producers in the type of consumer products that this generation that is evolving is going to require.
President Kenyatta also called for the opening of African borders in order to do more trade with all nations on this continent.
So these borders were not made for us. If we are going to become manufacturing giants, we need to do away with these borders. We need to see the African market as one.
The two leaders also discussed the latest developments around the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including the important matter of vaccine manufacturing and distribution. Yudisa Njomela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Now, youth unemployment is a growing challenge for the African continent. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called on leaders at the Intra-African Trade Fair to work tirelessly to end the crisis. Now, in South Africa alone, 1 in every 2 young people are currently jobless. Across the continent, COVID-19 has deepened the job crisis, with women and young people bearing the brunt. Now, special focus was given to job creation and youth startups at this year's fair as the continent moves towards the implementation of a single trade area. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with more.
It was Benjamin Teshefu's first visit to an intra-African trade fair. The youth startup program was of particular interest to the 28-year-old tech entrepreneur.
The fair is actually quite an interesting thing for young people to come and just have an experience for themselves to see what's really happening. And since I've been here, I think it's just been great.
There is, however, much work to be done in bridging the skills divide and the lack of resources that keeps so many youngsters locked out of the economy.
Maybe the new frontier of what we're looking for could be how we can make data more affordable. And since if that could be solved, then things like having digitized solution or digitized information would actually help more young people to jump on either to the employment market or to start creating stuff of their own.
The opportunity to showcase products, pitch ideas and network with business and political heavyweights has been priceless.
I'm based in Durban in South Africa. I want to be able to trade with youth from Senegal, from Ghana, from Tanzania, from Zimbabwe. And now the best thing about this conference is opening up and actually crushing those barriers, because that has been one of the biggest challenges, being able to trade amongst ourselves.
We can create jobs if we as small businesses can also be sustainable. So when you get to a conference like this and you see products available, you immediately get creative ideas on what else you can create.
It's been an eye-opener actually, because we've seen things that we do not have in our country, we don't have in Eswatini. So now that we're here, we're able to meet people who are manufacturers and where we can get these things at much like affordable prices.
Outside the conference halls, however, the story is slightly bleaker. Many working at the fair will not have jobs once it leaves town.
You obviously have to hope that something is going to come up, from the friends and families that you have, like your spectrum of network, because those are the people that sort of plug you into different opportunities. So yeah, but besides that, it's literally just waiting for another opportunity to come up.
The World Bank estimates that by 2050, half of the more than 1 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa will be under the age of 25. At least 10 million jobs need to be created every year for the burgeoning population. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And let's head to Zimbabwe now. The International Monetary Fund expects the country's economy to grow by 6% this year due to a bumper harvest during the last agricultural season. Now, the Bretton Woods institution is, however, warning that the growth can only be sustained by structural reforms aimed at stabilizing the local currency.
After 2 years of successive contraction, things are looking up again for Zimbabwe's economy. A good rainy season in 2020 has been the catalyst for the rebound, which has some market watchers concurring with the International Monetary Fund's positive growth projections.
The Zimbabwean economy is largely agrarian, so 60% of the raw materials that are used in the manufacturing sector emanate from the agric sector. So if you have got a bumper harvest, especially for strategic crops such as maize, wheat and soya, then it does also tends to lead to an improvement in capacity utilization for the industry.
Manufacturing contribution to GDP rose to 18% in 2021, a boon for formal enterprises that are trying to claw back market share from the expanding informal sector. This is where the bulk of economic activity is now taking place. However, information about the volume of business and transactions that are done here is hard to come by, and if available, not entirely reliable. That has cast some doubts over the accuracy of the upbeat outlook, especially as some here have seen business waning.
Our sales are much lower compared to previous years, and I don't think it has anything to do with COVID-19 because the restrictions were lifted some time ago. I think it's just an issue of people not having as much money to spend.
The challenges are indicative of headwinds still facing the economy despite its recent improvement.
You look at the massive, dollarization that has happened now. The US dollar is now the de facto currency, even if we are not formally a dollarized economy. Then you also have concerns when it comes to the auction rate. A lot of traders now in the market largely rely on the parallel market in terms of pricing their goods. So it means inflation is going to be driven by parallel market, movements.
The IMF has urged Zimbabwe to implement structural reforms that will defend the local currency and sustain growth. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business Africa, we'll bring you the latest developments from Ethiopia's ongoing civil war. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Vuche. Well, let's go now to news from Egypt. The country's tourism ministry has launched a website of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, which was built in 1902. It was the first building ever constructed to house a museum in the country. Before that, palaces were converted to serve that purpose. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more about the website and Egypt's efforts to promote its tourism online.
The new website marks the 119th anniversary of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. With over 150,000 pieces, it's the largest of its kind to be dedicated to one civilization. The team that created the website were led by Khaled Sharif, who says it's meant to reach out to those who are fascinated by the ancient Egyptian civilization.
The site provides an overall idea about the museum collections in the artifacts. There is a number of photos that has been taken for the masterpieces at the museum. It also provides an idea about the history of the museum building itself. The site also capitalized on technology in providing the ability to buy online tickets. So today, through the site of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo.
The website is the culmination of a digital transformation strategy by the government, which the tourism industry is optimizing to advertise the country's attractive destinations.
During 2020, the peak of the lockdown, we started introducing the virtual tourism as a concept, and there were a number of 360 movies and 3D images, high-resolution images that were introduced over the lockdown period. Let's always keep in mind that the lockdown period made people forget about how beautiful some destinations are. So that's where the campaigns came quite useful. They reminded the tourists outside Egypt with the beauty of spending some time in Egypt.
Tourism is one of the main sources of hard currency for the North African country. It's slowly recovering after being hit hard due to global travel restrictions after the breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
We're having positive reactions from all markets these days.
Still, 2010 is the winning year so far. It was 14 million visitors came to Egypt, mostly 80% to Sinai and the Red Sea. Of course, 2019, we reached around 12 millions. So far, after the COVID and the pandemic, things became decreased definitely, and it went to 3.5 million. But I think we are going to reach the 7 or 8 million by the end of this year.
And experts believe the aggressive online marketing is timely.
For sure, we are expecting a very positive results from everyone who uses the smartphones around the world, who can access those mobile applications made by Egyptians for the sites. And we're expecting more and more online bookings. Over and above, Ministry of Tourism have established a link, a hyperlink that can allow everyone to access it. And this link can send WhatsApp messages and SMSs to all the clients, informing them about the updates, what is going on in the market. And this is quite an advantage for the tourism these days. Everything is becoming e-tourism.
Another popular online engine is the virtual tour inside the Great Pyramids of Giza. And the government is also planning a similar virtual tour of the Grand Egyptian Museum once it's inaugurated in early 2022. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.